folks. I said something in a video earlier that I feel like I need to apologize for. But it may not be for what you think.
Welcome to Courage and the Constitution. I'm just a guy digging behind the headlines to get to the nuggets of truth. I'm tired of the rhetoric and the propaganda. I'm being lied to by the media. I just want to know what's going on in the world. So let's do this.
The split in ideologies between the left and the right, they can't be any more gaping. The left continues to grow more and more fanatic in their lunacy and just their grasping for power. Their expectations are about all those under them. That's us. That's myself. That's you. Submitting to their ideology and their demands. I mean, just look at every single one, and I mean every single one of their legislation and the laws that they're trying to pass. Every single one is rooted in restricting the freedoms of people and constricting their rights, including those rights around the First and Second Amendment, by controlling who says what, when, and how, creating truth and reconciliation committees, whatever the hell that is, absolute infringement on the freedoms of speech, whether somebody agrees with that speech or not. Meanwhile, the right, they continue to stand on the rights of individual freedoms to allow everyone, even their opponents and those with whom they don't agree with, to have the space to speak freely and share ideas and even have the space to have conflict with one another, to gather, and even practice the greatest right of all, and that's the right of self-protection, in order to assure that the other rights can be experienced, such as those God-given gifts of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, I said something in a previous video in which I mentioned something along the lines of how we need to just relax and not overreact and jump too quickly to any conclusions or act too hastily in, well, certain particular ways. Now, although I still stand behind that, and I think it's correct, with the full speed that this downhill runaway train called our country is traveling, I'm not quite so sure that I was right. I at least have to question my prior position. You see, there's two great things that have me concerned, and it's not just the hypocrisy of the left and the way that they celebrate their own side, creating and causing destruction and mayhem, and even death, as we've seen for months in riots involving BLM and Antifa, but it's something even far more insidious than that, that's poisoning the agenda, a poisonous agenda in the water and the well from which this nation drinks. And I have been reading and I've been looking at reports and testimonies of how people are being shut down and canceled and removed without warning or even reason given from every major social platform, even as they take huge financial hits. I mean those social platforms, social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, what else is out there, Snapchat, and so forth. They continue to kick people off of there, and they continue to make these huge moves, even though they are essentially creating echo chambers of just one ideology while silencing all the others, even to the detriment of the financial strength of their own platforms and their own companies. Listen to this. When a company is willing to take a multi-million or multi-billion in some cases hit to their bottom line in order to force through a completely one-sided agenda while disenfranchising and silencing up to half the country, that says something of the magnitude of what is going on here. Remember AOC and Pelosi and others on the left who are pushing hard to form what they're calling that Truth and Reconciliation Committee. That name alone, just think about that. The government is creating something called a Truth and Reconciliation Committee. That name alone, regardless of what political side you're on, should terrify you. The fact that the government will get to be the ones to determine what is true and what is not, and who gets to speak and who doesn't, and who has a voice in the nation, who's silenced. I mean, think about that. Think about every other single nation that exact thing has happened to, and the direction that nation ended up going, and what it ended up doing, and what it ended up costing the people in grave ways that none of these nations have ever fully recovered from, save for maybe Germany. And you can't think that if you're on the side that the Truth and Reconciliation Committee isn't coming after, that you're exempt. This is a hungry beast that feeds even on itself, y'all. In speaking of what had been done in these other unfortunate nations, here in the U.S., just in the last few days, we've already seen bills be drawn up in regard to gun ownership and the speed to which they're trying to move toward confiscation. I can promise you, with what's going on in Capitol Hill, this is going to move ahead at a rate that we have never seen before. It's often been said that the Second Amendment is that which gives teeth to all the rest, including the First Amendment. But now they're going after the First and the Second at the same time. Just stop for a moment, regardless of where you stand politically, and just think rationally. And I'm begging you to just put on whatever objective lens that you can and try to remember that ability of being able to think critically if you've forgotten it, and not rely on what other people tell you to believe, and look at the bricks that are being laid in place and what that means. Look at the foundation that's being put. Folks, I don't want to fearmonger, and I don't want to over-sensationalize anything. That's not why I created this channel. Remember, I say in the intro that it's to get behind the headlines and look at the truth of what's really going on. Those bricks that are being laid that I mentioned, that foundation, that thing that's being built, look at it. It's happening right in front of us. That's reality, and it should terrify you. To make another point toward that point, do you notice how the left can not only themselves give credit to good things that Donald Trump has done as he's done them, even if they hate him? They can't. They can't. It's just this derangement that they have, this what people call the Trump derangement syndrome. They just can't. But let me explain something. I myself am not very much a fan at all of Joe Biden by any means. In fact, I would love to see him and Kamala both out of office, that they're not even in yet. I would love to see him out yesterday. However, when he does things that are good, as I've done before, I will give credit to those particular things, because that is what a rational, objective adult does. A rational, objective adult who is mature can look at somebody they do not like, but still give credit for positive attributes or positive things that they do or they accomplish. Not only can the left not do this with Donald Trump, even with the fantastic things that he's done, but the leaders of the left, they demand that the people not give him any credit for anything, punishing those who do, literally, and listen very carefully to this, literally telling people what to think and what to say. And if they disobey that edict, as we've seen, the threat of punishment and social disgrace is severe. Think about that. What to think, what to say. Just think about that for a moment. In fact, I'm going to give you, it's going to be a little weird, but I'm going to give you a few uncomfortable moments to sit quietly and just ponder the immense gravity behind what I just said. The government determining what you will think and what you will say. People, I'm going to repeat what I said the last few minutes succinctly and simply. And keep in mind, I've not even touched on how the left has crushed the constitutional protection for the right to assemble, except for those who, again, meet to assemble under their approval and for their approved purposes. The Constitution be damned. The left is taking away our freedom of speech and our First Amendment rights. Literally taking them away and stripping them from us, even though they're protected by the Constitution. And if they can take away those rights and strip them, what other constitutional rights can they also come in and try to take from us? Even if you, watching this right now, are angry at me and you're just pissed off at me, you just hate me with a passion, and you might happen to be somebody on the left and you just completely disagree with where the right itself stands, you should never disagree that we all, us and you, regardless of how much we may not like each other, we have the right to the freedom of speech. Everybody. And the precedent set when millions of people are suddenly silenced. Or what do you think it means for us when they take away our Second Amendment rights? Just a very quick and precise move to disarm people. Don't just take it from me. In fact, here, I'm going to play you a video. Listen to this woman who survived a Nazi takeover in Austria.
We also had gun control. The government said that children were playing with guns and we had hunting accidents, people accidentally shooting each other, and we had criminals again, murderers. The only way that they could track the murderer was by the serial number of the gun. So bring your gun to the police station, then we can register the serial number and we can track the criminal. And we thought that was a good idea. So gladly we did that. Not long afterwards, they said, no, it did not help. We could not track all the criminals. The best way to have no more crimes and no more people getting hurt, bring your guns to the police station, and they already know who had guns because we registered our guns. Keep your guns and buy more guns and stack up on your ammo. A gun is no good if you don't have any ammo. Dictatorship did not happen overnight. It took 5 years, from 1938 until 1943, we had a full-blown dictatorship. Had we kept our guns, we would have fought a bloody battle to the last men and women to keep our freedom. But we had no guns. A classic example is, in Switzerland, it is law that everybody has to have a gun. And Hitler took every country in Europe except Switzerland. And Switzerland did not have a war for more than 600 years. Hitler never tackled Switzerland. So keep your guns. Keep your guns.
Well, how sobering is that? And that's just 2 minutes from a couple different speeches she gave, about 45 minutes, an hour or so long. What she explains, what she experienced, what she lived through, what she's warning us of, guys, that is so freaking telling. And it's also so applicable to what we're beginning to see here. In fact, I just want to make a quick note. I am very close to a lot of people who are Slavic. Their parents coming from actual communist rule. The children removed just generation, but the effects of it remaining. And these people are the ones that I talk to here, as well as even my wife, who's Russian, speaking to her mother in Russia. What they tell you on the media about the rest of the world looking at us and thinking we're crazy and Donald Trump is a lunatic, that's not true. In these different nations, of all the people I'm talking to, overseas, as they are watching, for the ones that are under socialism or under communism, for the ones that are seeing the news, especially from the left, and what they're doing about taking away freedom of speech, disarming the people, all of this crazy stuff about you can't even say he, she, them, mother, father, all this anymore, using these pronouns, they are over there saying, what is wrong with you people? Open your eyes. Look at what's happening. People, look. Just seems appropriate to make mention of that after what we saw from that lady who lived through Nazi Germany. And no, it's not Nazi the way that the left conflates Donald Trump with being Hitler. Not that fake stuff that they're putting out. Real. Real. And I want you also to pay attention to the aggression at the speed at which the state governments are being reduced. And centralized federal government is growing in just as overarching and almost indefeatable power. That means the states are going to have less and less power and authority over themselves, while the one single centralized American government is going to call all the shots and tell people who they are, what to think, how to look, and what they will be. Part of what made this country our size work with so many different states and cultures and subcultures was that there were always a federal government, but with limited reach, while the states and the local jurisdictions could govern themselves. So Rapid City, South Dakota, for example, is not the same as Chicago, Illinois, nor should the same rules apply. Biden's desire to completely kill the right to bear arms federally, nationwide, from small town middle America to the Big Apple in New York, is nothing short of tyranny. They say it's for your safety, but really, in small town America, remember what Kitty Worthman, the woman in that video that we just saw from Nazi Germany, do you remember what she said, that Germany said about her safety too? Now, is the U.S. aiming to be Nazi Germany? No, probably not. But are we sure they were not trying to force us into submission under them through other means? Yeah, they are. This is the direction the left is moving, and they have all the support in the world with such as big tech and sports and entertainment influencers and the media and the huge organizations around them just profiting together from not only their growing and almost now impregnable power, but in their greatest transfer of wealth ever in American history, from individuals and small businesses in this country being transferred to large corporations and lobbyists, all working with and supporting the Democratic Party, led specifically by Joe Biden. Oh, and let's not forget the real powers at the top and where they're very actively playing a role in all this. Now, these players have been here for a long time, but just as everything else, in just the last few weeks, we have seen moves by them that up to this point have been unprecedented. The banking industry is playing a role in all that we're seeing, and their role is quickly becoming bigger. They have so much power, folks, to manipulate the political realm, this whole political sphere. And with Joe Biden inaugurated, that role is open to enormity. Banks have overstepped their bounds, and they are being used for political reasons and leverage. They're being petitioned to, for example, damage the gun industry, to reject doing business with anybody in the industry, leaving that industry financially crippled. And as we see with Donald Trump and others, banks are maliciously withdrawing service to cripple political opponents and those people who support them. The thing is this, every one of these political entities being systematically targeted are those on the right. The banks have become so powerful and so big and so involved in their lobbying in American government that they are another weaponized tool being wielded by the left. And there's already a very large number of people who've had their accounts just taken away just because of their political opinions. Now, I'm no banking and finance expert, nor is this world my wheelhouse. But what I can say is that many of these banks have been very, very dirty. HSBC, for example. They've been caught in just severe criminal activity. In fact, they paid a $1.9 billion, people, that's billion dollar fee in order to avoid further persecution for some of their sins. Now, MarketWatch wrote this report about HSBC. Here, let me show you. HSBC paid $1.9 billion fine in 2012 to avoid prosecution. You see that? To avoid prosecution for allowing at least $881 million in proceeds from the sale of illegal drugs. In addition to facilitating money laundering by drug cartels, evidence was found of HSBC moving money for Saudi banks tied to terrorist groups. I just want to make a note, they were also tied to issues with Iran as well. Even though federal investigators found evidence that senior bank officials were complicit in the illegal activity, no HSBC executives face charges for their actions. Oh, and one of those cartels, maybe you've heard of somebody who goes by El Chapo. So let me just try to explain this just a bit further. It's not just this report, which I'll show you a screenshot from my phone of this PDF that I have of it that I've saved, but in other studies as well that explain this country, in reality, actually holds just a facade of a democratic republic, but really the actual control is that of the elite in the financial institutions. Take it even further with social media and platforms like Google, and you can see how much power they have, essentially more power than the government. That's right. They, through their algorithms and through who they choose to or choose not to delete or allow the voices or allowing the calls to violence and shows of actual violence from the left leaving it on their platforms, but removing anything that can even be remotely, by the longest stretch of imagination, considered potential of what they then define in the moment as violence from the right, or removing people just for political opinion. They essentially control the minds and the thinking of the people, not to mention the necessity to access to the access of the technology, which they could just pull the plug on and cripple the nation. I talk more about big tech in other videos, so I'm not going to go much further into it here. Suffice it to say, with big tech and banks and these huge untouchable financial lobbyists, studies have come out showing that the US, as I said, is in reality only a veiled representation of a republic. But in truth, it's actually governed as a plutocracy. And if you don't know, plutocracy refers to a society where the wealth is controlled by a select few and where economic growth becomes dependent on that same wealthy minority. And remember, economics touches everything. So the ruling class, and this is very important as it doesn't reflect every wealthy people who are principled, but the ruling class of elites and the wealthy actually control everything. Studies have given great credibility to the fact that with many decision makers and policy makers and those who govern, political opinion and perception actually has no impact, none. That means in all practicality, you have no voice on legislation. The impact is made by the lobbyists and wealthy elites. So ultimately, when all is said and done, you just get to do what you're told. And the left is pushing for more of this in unprecedented ways and speed. Now, I mentioned Joe Biden, how this disparity is going to get wider in these financial institutions and wealthy elite, how they're being absolutely weaponized to continue to degrade political opposition. The flip side of that being to give unchallenged power to those who are in control. And I mentioned Joe Biden because that wealthy elite, those bankers, those people, those lobbyists, that is who he has been establishing and bringing in as his transition team and putting in positions of power in his cabinet. Just like the HSBC Bank, these people can get away with the worst crimes and atrocities. I want you to think even death and war globally, but they are untouchable. Think for just a moment of what that really means for American government and what that really means for you. So folks, I really don't even know what else to tell you now. I don't know even how long a message like this is going to be allowed to be up on YouTube. But I know we are a nation of rule and of law and order. And we still have legal channels which to handle things. But when those legal channels are corrupted and they side with those who are stripping people of their rights while the government becomes huge and gorging itself on the people, and the people are forced into deep strangulation and restriction under that umbrella of what the government tells them that they can do, what they can be, how they can look, and what they can think, and especially what they can or cannot say, or else, well, I don't even know what to say. I suppose just be aware and be ready for whatever may come, and by God, people, please listen. Do not just sit passively and comfortably on your sofa doing life and just leaving things to chance and expecting that other people are going to go do things and set things right and that everything is just going to work out. We are not in that same space and environment in our country anymore. People, I'm begging with you, please be active, be aware. Everything depends on it. We cannot be a silent majority any longer. Otherwise, that silence, it won't be a choice. It'll be forced on us. We already see it happening. We cannot be made to be afraid and slink into the shadows and obscurity and hope that we can just blend in enough to not be discovered. If we believe in we the people, and we believe in our American liberties and our hard-fought American freedoms and the very Constitution that many on the left have even made known that they want to dissolve in the favor of replacing it with a different document, then we have to rise up to the occasion as it calls us. So what do you think? Are you willing to be active and be a voice, or does fear have you in its grasp? And if it does, look, I'm not shaming you. I understand it can be frightening and it can be scary to stand against this and be a voice, to challenge it. But I am challenging you to rise up, to rise above that. What do you think? Leave your comments below. And if you do find this content of value and it hits home to you, then I would like to ask that you please subscribe, share, like, that all that will help me grow the channel and that'll reach more people with our voice. And that will do a lot to help us all out. And finally, there are those who have forgotten their integrity and forsaken principle. We can't be like that. We have to rise above it. We have to be that greater example. So be wise, be discerning, be unbreakable, and do not ever, ever, ever allow anybody to control you with fear.